This week's The Rahman Experience is brought to you by the Jacksonville Free Press newspaper, bringing you quality urban news for more than 30 years. Heart SEO, search engine management, optimization, and web building, giving you the tools to make your business soar. And PMP Nutrition and Supplements, all the right things to get your body exactly where you want it to be. It's PMPnutrition.com. It's one of the hottest podcasts in the country. This is The Rahman Experience.
Just like on the earth, through death comes life.
There is something in the atmosphere of Edgewater College.
What about vaping and the effects on the lungs? It was a symbol of we can.
Rahman was a man of the city, you hear me?
You're inside the Rahman Experience.
It's the Rahman Experience.
The Rahman Experience.
The knowledge that he dropping, most dismiss and make you curious.
And we can't mess this up, cause you know he gon' be furious.
He bring the news to you, cause it's the truth, ain't no stopping it. Say you didn't know, well here's the proof coming from
Rahman Johnson, ain't no straight out of Compton. Duval County with that weight that we rockin'. Now you tuned in to
the Rahman Experience.
Hey, what's up? It's Rahman Johnson, your host of the Rahman Experience. Welcome. Hope you guys are having an absolutely iconic time as you shelter in place. Hopefully you're taking the advice of Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. There's a great meme I'm going to throw up on my Instagram. Go check it out. Instagram.com/RahmanJ. Hilarious. While she says to stay your behinds home. So I hope while you're sheltering in place, you are listening to old episodes or vintage episodes of the Rahman Experience, but also taking care of yourselves and your families. I've lost a couple of family members to the coronavirus. Recently, a friend to a heart attack. Somebody I worked out with at the gym a lot. So I'm at this point, I just want to make sure, guys, that we're taking care of each other. So reach out to someone you hadn't talked to in a while, but let's take care of each other. Before I jump into the show today, I want to talk more. This is something that's near and dear to me. For those that know me, I like to work out quite frequently. And this is something, when President Donald Trump revealed his guidelines for opening up America, among the bolded names of businesses and institutions he wanted to open up were restaurants, movie theaters, places of worship. But at the bottom of the list, right above the warning, was gyms. Gyms. And I say that because I am a gym enthusiast, and I've had to learn how to rework my life so that I could do home workouts. And you know that an integral part of our lives are gyms, fitness clubs. And the thing you know about a gym, it is that it's an incubator of viruses. I'm always, sterilizing the equipment that I use, but come on, it's the gym. That's what people do. People are sweating, they're breathing hard, they're sharing equipment, they're tight spaces. That's somewhere that you really want to keep closed during a pandemic. And I looked at this, and then I understood what happened. There was a last-minute lobbying push by an industry that has not flexed its muscles much in Washington, and it's the gym industry. Not every major company was part of the effort. I want to say that, but there were 10 leaders in the fitness business, and they said they were an influential group of relationships that kicked into gear to help put gyms specifically on that list. And one of the biggest people that was being pushed on that list was a fitness center owner in Pennsylvania. Wait for it. When I tell you this connection, you're going to say, oh, I get it. This fitness center in Pennsylvania is owned by Rudy Giuliani's son, Andrew, billionaire mogul Steve Ross, and the Surgeon General. And that gym, again, I know this is like, you're thinking, what is this? It shows that there's like a reckless abandon for intelligent thought. Here's another thing. Among the most influential advocates of getting the gyms open again is the owner of Lifetime Fitness. This guy, Bahram Akradi, he's Iranian. He's been pitching governors around the state about making sure that gyms are part of this plan to open them up. Yeah. In fact, executives from Gold's Gym and other independent gyms have said they did not expect the gyms to be mentioned in reopening plans because they know that the gyms could be an incubator of disease and germ. Yeah. I don't get it. So there you have it. Those people who, like myself, love the gym and are gym enthusiasts, I hope that just because the gym's open don't mean you'll go back and put yourself in harm's way. Without any further ado, though, let's get to this show. We're going to run a little long. I will tell you that, so you may need to pick up and listen again. But right now, let's jump back into my interview with three-time Billboard DJ of the Year, three-time Billboard Program Director of the Year, author, former talk show host, sports commentator, all-around great guy. This is part 2 of my talk with Marc Little in the Rahman Experience.
It was interesting because the guy who hired me in South Carolina, a guy by the name of Cliff Fletcher, worked for Arbitron, which is the ratings company.
Right.
And Arbitron, he would the South was his territory. And he bought this station because of him dealing with the radio station. He found the station was for sale. He wanted to buy the station. But he needed a program director. He came to Jacksonville. I got to know him real well, and he had lunch with him. I told him things were changing at PDQ. It was 1984. He said, "Why don't you come work for me? You're down up in South Carolina." He made me director, paid me a great salary. I mean, they flew me up, moved me the whole nine. Yeah. Much different than 1972, 12 years earlier. And I know I'm going all over the place with this.
No, this is good information, yeah.
And so I worked there, and of course, Charlemagne was probably not even a preteen. He's probably just maybe 10 years old. That was 1984, and I don't know how old he is now. So, and that was 36 years ago? Yeah, 36 years ago. So anyway, radio for me really helped me in so many ways because I took radio in a different way because my thing was putting a face to the voice. I would go and do things. I would Come Together Day, and I wasn't even working at WOBS when Come Together Day was, but I was accepted by those guys because I was a different kind of what we called ourselves back in those days, air personality.
On-air personality, not just a DJ.
Right. And so I got a chance to know and they got a chance to know me. And so I became very melded into this community, except for one point, and one point only. As they say, you're not from here. Yeah. And they made that very clear to me. Yeah. And they make it clear to me today. And I am approaching my 48th year in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah. And they still tell me, you're not from here.
And I guess that's people's way. In some way, we want to divide.
Well, that's that southern, northern dynamic that people who don't know don't really understand that. That's always been. Whenever people left the South and went north, they say, "Oh, you going to be one of them," and you don't. And your people they don't mind you coming down for the reunion or coming down to see a grandma, grandpa, Ray, and Jim Bob and them.
But going back home.
But you're going back home. Yeah. You're going back up north, or as they say, up south. So, but see, with me, I was enamored because I wasn't allowed to come to the South.
So this was a
different world.
An expedition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, even though there were those who told me that you're not from here, there were those who embraced me, and they still embrace me to this day. I remember Mark L. He used to do basketball games. I remember he used to do this. I remember he was on Channel 4.
Well, there are people who also swear me up and down that you went to Raines and graduated.
Oh, please. They were watered. The one is about they were watered. They were in my class.
Yes.
I was in class at Water. I said, no, I used to hang out at Everwater. Right. Why'd you hang out at Everwater? Because y'all had the women.
And you were literally a block or two away on Myrtle Avenue.
Well, see, I left Myrtle Avenue.
You were somewhere else.
And I moved down to St. John's Apartments. I lived downtown.
It's still 5 minutes away.
Yeah, but I didn't have a car.
Well,
I didn't have a car. I used to ride a bike to work at one point. Oh, man, I can tell you some stuff, man, that would just have you. You probably have an accident.
Those radio stories, man,
I'm
telling
please.
you.
I mean.
You went from doing, and one day we'll have to just do radio. I know I brought you on when I used to host at the Ritz. And we talked about your time in radio, one of the deans of the business part of radio. But you left radio, music radio as we know it, R&B, and you ended up going and doing even more stuff. In fact, I was with
Sam Kavaris the other day, former Jacksonville Mayor Jake Godbold passed away.
You with Sam?
I was with Sam. Sam came to Jake Godbold's funeral.
That's a good friend of mine.
And you remember I got into TV because when I started my career on the TV side,
right?
It was at Channel 4.
Right.
And I was with Sam and, we kind of caught up. I hadn't seen him in a while. Sam was like one of the biggest sportscasters in the country.
I got a story to tell you about Sam.
Well, Sam... And you worked with Sam, right? Didn't you work?
No.
Who did sport? Weren't you there when you guys did
I
sports
got fired
at 4?
the week Sam started.
I thought you guys worked together at 4.
No. He wanted me back because let me tell you what happened.
Okay, 900-pound gorilla in the room. The question, why'd you get fired?
They used to have what they call a junior AAU basketball tournament here. Magic Johnson had started it years ago. And it was 1981, because the same year my son Matthew was born. And I was going out to with a camera crew to do highlights for the 11 o'clock news, and they were playing it at the NAS Jacksonville. NAS Jacksonville? They were playing the games at NAS Jacksonville. I was still working radio at the time, and I was doing TV on the weekends. So I had some stuff I had to do with the radio station. So I told the camera guy, I didn't ride with him. I said, meet me down there. So I was riding by myself. So I didn't have the TV thing where when the guard stopped you at the gate, they knew you were TV, just showed you whatever you had to do and you go on in. I had no ID, no official ID, not as I was working. So I drive up to the gate. And the guy stops me, and I said, "Okay, I'm Marc Little. I'm with Channel 4, and I'm here to do highlights for tonight's game." So the guy got real nasty with me. "Where's your ID?" I gave him my driver's license, everything. I said, "I don't have any official. I didn't have a press card. Didn't have my press card. Didn't have a press pass or anything. If I did, I might have left it home. I don't know." I said, "Well, can you maybe have someone go inside and find Joe Burns?" His name was Joe Burns, said.
To vouch for me.
Right. Hell no. Then he said, "Go over there." They came and searched my car. Short story, they wouldn't let me in. Now, I'm 30 years old at the time. Yeah. So I was full of I was a little bit full of myself. I'm working at Channel 4.
And you're on the radio. You're PD by this time.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't PD at that time. I was still doing radio, but I was doing on air, but I wasn't PD.
Okay. But you had a little clout.
At least I thought I did.
Okay.
So, turned me away. And at the time, I was on the Jacksonville Sports Entertainment Commission. Mayor Jake Godbold appointed me to the commission at the behest of then Councilman Rodney Hurst. So I got back and I wrote a letter to the editor of the Florida Times Union, about the way I was treated. And this was Ronald Reagan's first year. And I went through this thing about they shouldn't have the game. I talked about the treatment that happened and they printed the letter. I wish I could find a copy.
Because you're a personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I talked about the treatment I got and that it was military treatment and kids shouldn't be playing basketball on military bases. And oh my gosh. Well, anyway, Steve Wasserman, who had just gotten hired from the Post Newsweek, which owned Channel 4 at the time, and
was the GM.
WPLG was the sister station down in Miami. Well, he was a sales manager down in Miami, and he got elevated to general manager at JXT. Yeah. Now Amy McCombs,
there for quite a while.
Long time.
Yeah.
Well, Amy McCombs was the one who really pushed to hire me because they wanted to hire me full time, which I would have been hired full time had I stayed, and I would have worked with Sam. So anyway, there was a guy who was on the commission by the name of Mel Arthur, nasty SOB, couldn't stand me, and he contacted the city of Jacksonville and said they should remove me from the commission for what I said. Channel 4 got a bad rap over it, and they were getting calls from the public and letters from the public because, it's a military town. And they said Marc Little should be fired. And so Steve Wasserman calls me into a meeting. Now, mind you, I'm 30 years old, full of myself. Okay?
Okay.
You know about that.
No, I don't.
You never been full of yourself?
No, I don't know.
Don't get me to cussing. We sitting down here in all these pretty houses down here that I could have lived in one time of life. Anyway, so Steve said to me, he said, you really compromised your position here. So he went through the whole spiel and everything. He said, but if you apologize, and I didn't even let him get the words out of his mouth. I said, I'm not apologizing. I didn't even let him get the words out of his mouth. He could have come up with some kind of condition. I just wasn't here. I was not apologizing. He said, well, we have to let you go. That was it. Sam Kavaris started that Friday. Sam Kavaris, now, let me tell you about this thing with Sam Kavaris. There was a guy by the name of Paul Cameron who worked with Glenn Fisher, who worked for the Jaguars. I think he's retired now, but he was working on the air. Glenn was the one who hired me in 1978. My first report, by the way, was when Florida A&M was one.
This is your first report on JXT.
JXT, okay. Right. Well, the first report on TV.
And WJXT at the time was one of the top stations.
Was
in Florida.
Top, one of the top, and the
top in Jacksonville.
By hands down.
But one of the top in Florida and the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, you had a lot. Steve, what's the name on 60 Minutes? Worked at Channel 4. There's a guy named Bill Baxter, was a big time guy in L.A. Worked at Channel 4. You had some Steve Croft. Steve Croft came through Channel 4.
So it was a heavy hitting TV operation.
Please, big time. So, where was I going? Oh, so anyway, Glenn Fisher was the one who hired me, and his weekend man was Paul Cameron. Well, Paul ended up getting the regular gig because Glenn quit and went to, where did Glenn go? I forgot where Glenn went. Glenn got fired, and Paul took his spot, and I thought Paul was going to bring in somebody else. But me and Paul had created such a great bond till he hired me to do sports anchoring on the weekend and reporting during the week when I could do it. When I could do it, after hours. I couldn't do it during the day because I had my daytime job. So, they were getting ready. Paul was getting ready to leave. And they would get all these audition tapes back in the day with the VHS or whatever the tapes were. So one night that the guy who used to work with me in the weekends, a guy by the name of Tom Peters, great editor. He could edit tape like it was nothing. I mean, he was good. So they had this stack of tapes. He said, I want you to look through these tapes. Tell me who you like on these tapes. So we went through all these tapes, people from Tulsa, Oklahoma, people from Savannah and everything. And we get to Sam Kavaris' tape. Tom Peters couldn't stay. I don't like her. I said, I think the guy's got promise. I like this tape.
Okay.
So I said, this is my vote. For whoever, it wasn't going to mean anything. You follow me? It wasn't going to mean that he was going to hire him just on our say so, but it made me feel good. He let us look at the tapes. So I said, I like this one. It was Sam Kavaris. Well, Sam Kavaris gets the job. And so after I got fired and all that aftermath, about a year later, I was doing high school sports at the time as well. So Sam would listen to me doing my play-by-play for the basketball games, Dana Raines and Reebok and Jackson and all those rivalries were going on. And he used to listen to me, loved me. He said, Mark, you think I'm going to try to get you back over here? Well, by that time, they had the Bill Brown, who was the news director at Channel 4 when I was working the weekends, had ended up leaving. And a guy there by the name of Mel Martin came in. Now, Mel was there when I went through my stuff with the Sports Commission and people, ended up getting fired. And Sam went to Mel and said, I want to rehire Marc Little. Nope, can't have it. Nope, can't come back. Nope, can't.
Because he knew about the situation.
He knew about this, and he didn't particularly care for me. Yeah. Sam wanted to hire me, and he tried a couple of times. They had another news director came in, and he wanted to hire me.
How'd you get away from radio, which you had done all your life, and then over to TV, which was you've been more of a broadcaster, news and information. Mm-hmm. Then you made your trek over to talk, which is, people think radio is radio, but
talk radio is a different animal.
It's a different animal. It's almost like
it's personality radio.
It is, and I've been able to carry a show, but it's certainly not what I did when I was on music radio. Because you're talking for 30 seconds, 2 minutes at the most, whereas talk radio, you are carrying this thing.
You had to carry on.
You're carrying it.
Yeah.
How'd you get that transition of, and you got to have an opinion.
Well,
and a lot of jocks, honestly, and I'm not. I hope I don't get beat up for this, but I remember back in the day, everything was on liner cards.
Oh yeah.
So you don't really have to think about a lot. You're like, okay, show coming up, party coming up.
Just have a different way of being. Have some personalization in reading the line
But
card.
you really don't have to have an opinion.
No. Oh no.
But in talk radio, the death is not having an opinion about something. I don't care if it's conservative. I don't care if it's liberal. I don't care. You gotta have an opinion, and you gotta intelligently be able to back it up. How'd you get over into that space?
Very interesting. I opened a business in 1984.
Was that UMC?
No, it wasn't UMC.
And UMC was your...
It was Marc Little Communications.
Okay, and UMC, which was, I guess, the foreparent of Urban Media Communications, which is the great-great-granddaddy of Marc Little Public Relations.
Right.
Okay.
So I started that when I was in Charleston. I got my paperwork, my
business license,
business license, and also my corporate
seal and EIN, and
all that stuff. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So when I came back to Jacksonville, a year after I was in Charleston, and came back to WPDQ, which had been sold, and they wanted to try to reconfigure PDQ, which wasn't going to happen because we were really the last AM powerhouse in Jacksonville, because even Zaz, WZZ was going downhill. Although they're able to still do their little chicken, what I call chicken circuit radio, but it wasn't anything to the level of what 95X was and all those stations, and subsequently 101.5. So anyway, I had this business, and I was hustling up business all over the place. As I was working, they found out I was doing it. They said I had a contract. They said, well, we can't have you doing that and doing this too, so we're going to have to let you go. But they had a contract, so they paid me, I think, about $5,000 to get out the contract. So I was on my own, and I was married for my, I won't say which marriage it was, but I was married, and I had a son who was 4 years old. So I had to find a way to really make this thing happen. So I started a business, got a small office. And when I say small, it's very, very small. In
fact, a room.
It was a room.
Yeah.
Exactly. There you go. And it was a real small room. And Larry Brody helped me get it. It was on San Marco Boulevard, a place called the McCool Building. And the McCool's still on that building. I drove by there about 2 weeks ago because my cardiologist is over that way. So I started the business, and I got several contracts from people who were in radio with me. I got a contract with CBS Records to do some, actually I did some promoting for them of their labels. A guy by the name of Ruben Rodriguez hired me. I also did some work for Black Radio Exclusive Magazine. I was doing I was their East Coast correspondent, so I was making some money through the umbrella of my business. 1986 comes along, Steve Padgett is running for governor.
Yes.
Good friend of mine was part of the campaign. Her name is Thelma Jackson. Had been knowing Thelma for years.
Yes.
Thelma came to the radio station to play some advertising for the black side of the
urban,
campaign.
Whatever. At the time, it wasn't called urban, but
right. So she says, I'm walking her to a car in the parking lot, and she says to me, "You ought to think about doing some stuff in politics, doing some political stuff." She said, "You get paid real well for it, da-da-da-dee-dee-dee." So I worked on the Steve Padgett campaign, placing advertising for the black station, placing black newspapers. They were using a lot of black newspapers at that time. Yeah. Florida Star.
Because they were big. The Florida Star.
Yeah, right.
And prior to the Advocate and the Free Press, but around the state, there were great black newspapers.
And at the time, Ike Williams, God rest his soul, he had his newspaper. And he was working with Rita Perry at the time. Before they went their separate ways.
Right, the Advocate.
Right, the Advocate, exactly. So I placed that. And there was a gentleman involved in the campaign by the name of Tommy Hazuri, who watched me work. He was state representative at the time. Yeah. After Bob Martinez beat Steve Padgett, the Padgett campaign owed me some money. And I couldn't get my money. So I got PO'd. Once again, even though it was a few years later, but still kind of caught up in my own stuff. I was 37, maybe 36, 37 at the time. So I said, you know what? These Democrats get on my nerves. I started thinking about being a Republican. Yeah, true story. What capped me on that was Bob Martinez was making a strong push to get involved a lot of black people in his administration, the governor of Florida. There was a friend of mine who was my CPA at the time, who was a Republican, black Republican. He had some friends who were involved with Martinez, and they were trying to make a push to get more blacks appointed to boards and commissions and stuff in the state. He came to me and said, "What do you think about it?" And he said, I introduced you to people here in Jacksonville. We'll talk about it. So I talked to some Republicans off and on. What really, really capped it for me was when Jesse Jackson ran for the second time against Dukakis. Remember Jesse Jackson? 88. That's exactly right. And when it was apparent that Dukakis was going to win the nomination, they were talking about vice presidential candidates. And mind you, I was still a Democrat. But I was a little bit peeved the way Democrats handled their business.
And Jesse wasn't even a consideration.
No. And that pisses me off.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I was a kid, but you know how involved
angry.
I was with politics. And
right.
Yeah, he wasn't even a consideration.
Right.
Like now they're talking. Who was this? Joe Biden, I think, somebody was talking about Stacey Abrams.
Bloomberg.
It's Bloomberg.
Bloomberg has been meeting with her.
Yeah.
He has been meeting with her.
You hear all this stuff, but back then, Jesse Jackson, and he actually did do pretty well.
He not only did that, he expanded
the party.
He expanded the party.
Yeah.
He did what a lot of people couldn't do. In 84, he was a novice, but he won South Carolina and some other key primaries. But this time, because you know why? He had Ron Brown with him.
Yes. Who was brilliant.
Oh my gosh, please, we don't even want to talk about
Ron Brown. For those who don't remember,
we don't even want to talk about how brilliant Ron Brown was.
I was the former chair of the Democratic National Committee.
The first black chair, and up to this time, the only black, other than Donna Brazile when she sat in when somebody had to leave.
And he was also the Secretary of Commerce for the United States.
Yeah, and he was the one who helped Bill Clinton win that election in 1992.
Yeah,
let's make sure we got that right. So I wasn't feeling it. So when the Republicans came back at me, they wanted to. I said, "Well, y'all got to sweeten the pot," and and Bob Martinez said he would appoint me to the Commission on Human Relations, which was a very, very key prestigious commission because at the time the Fair Housing Act was being bandied about across the Fair Housing Acts were being bandied about across the country, and Florida was really caught in it. And so that was going to be, and that became our signature legislation. I sat on the commission that pushed that. I was part of that history-making thing, that Fair Housing Act in 1989 in the state of Florida. Wow. And I was a Republican. So 2 years later, a guy by the name of Jim Wells, who was city council at large, stepped down because, I'll say it now, but people didn't want to say it then. He got caught in a compromising position with another man.
Oh.
And they said, you need to step down. So the Republicans came to me and said, what do you think about running for office? And I had no inkling about running for office. Didn't know the first thing about running for office. Okay. Running for office and not even running a campaign, because I was just involved in the periphery of campaigns. I didn't know the in and out. I wasn't into the campaign. Oh, let me go back. 87. I'm sorry. I missed the key point of this thing. In 1987, Tommy Hazouri, who met me in the Paget campaign, had a meeting with me through Ann Shorstein, who was his person. We met right at the famous Amos on University Boulevard across from my office, where my office was on Chester Avenue later on in life. Where my office was. This really capped me to really go into Republican. I won't say Paget campaign. I forgot about the Missouri campaign. So I was
running for mayor.
And he had a 2% name recognition in the black community. John Lewis had a larger footprint in the black community than Tommy Hazouri had.
John Lewis, who
was a state representative,
white, and
First Baptist. Right, and he was a Northsider.
Right.
He was his dad, Earl Lewis, was part of the Northside Mafia, which of course they call it that, which was Jay Godbow, Joe Forche, the whole Northside crew. But John got on the wrong side of Jake because he called for the investigation. That's another whole story that I can't,
Which you can find in the book Jake by Mike Talbert.
Exactly. Of course, they'll have it slanted a different way. But I think I know most of the truth about that one. But anyway, so Tommy, I told them, I said, look, I got a business. I can't volunteer my time. I just can't do that. So y'all gonna have to come up with a budget. But we don't have that in the budget. Typical stuff they do with African Americans who want to be paid for campaigns. Not just paid off, but paid like a check, not some money under the table. I wanted a check so I could show.
$25.
And there wasn't gonna be no $25. And it wasn't $25 for me. It was a very good check.
But they didn't want to pay it, which is why.
Oh, they paid me. Oh, they got it. They paid me. Okay. And I produced. Tommy, I produced. I went out there, and I sat with Tommy, and I talked to him about each and every person he would meet, whether it was a pastor, whether it's a bishop, whoever it was. I schooled him, and his numbers in the black community kept rising because he was in a tough race. He was in a tough race. Henry Cook was Republican at the time. Doug Milne, who had a superb rating in the black community, Urban League. They loved Doug Milne, but Doug Milne was a sorry candidate. I say that. I'm not afraid to say that. These people can't do anything to me. So, and then John Lewis, and John was popular because John had Harold Gibson, who was very popular at the time, with him. And Harold Gibson had a lot of people who liked him, and so he inherited Harold Gibson's familiarity and popularity. I was like, they know Marc Little. We know him from radio.
A little bit of TV. And so I was out to prove a point. I know what I'm doing. Tommy ends up winning and that was the time when they had the Democratic and Republican primaries, not like they do with the unitary election. Now they had separate primaries. Right.
He beat John by a whisker. And there were some things that happened on the last weekend of the campaign that had I not been there, and I'll say that to this day, that could have turned into a major screw up, if I can say it that way. And I was there to be able to hold everybody at bay. He ended up that Tuesday. Of course, that was before early voting and all that kind of stuff. But that Tuesday, Tommy eked out a close victory. In fact, they went to a runoff. That's right, because they went to a Democratic runoff between him and John. Yeah. And it was a heck of a campaign.
I remember at the time there was a political operative in Jacksonville by the name of Hattie Dick Screen, who was one of my grandmother's dear friends. And I remember her working.
Yeah. Well, I brought her on.
She was working.
She barely knew Tommy. And she said, but I trust you, honey.
That sounds like her, honey.
I trust you, honey.
She was a big,
lovely.
Like this tall woman, but she knew everything about it.
These people, when I got in that time, and there were some people whose names I will not say, did not like it. I call them the black elite. They were the beginnings of the black elite. You got a new black elite now. And so they were saying to Tommy, he doesn't have a degree, and he's this, and their favorite thing.
I didn't know. Oh, you mean about you?
Yeah, he's not from here. Tommy didn't listen. To his credit, he stayed with me. But then again, once again, I won't say to his credit. When you see a person, when you see what you're getting out of a person,
he's delivering for you.
He's delivering. So
you're delivering for Tommy.
Tommy ain't no fool.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna give him more credit. It's not because I have an issue with Tommy. But my biggest thing is I didn't ask for anything. My thing was, if you do it, they should see it. And I was wrong. And so when the goodies started getting given out, people were saying, well, what's Marc going to get?
Yeah.
But the little elite said Marc shouldn't get a goodie. But that was cool. So that hastened my move over to the Republicans. So let's move to 1990. Jim Wells resigns. They're looking for somebody to run countywide. Now, I'll be honest with you. Had I run as a Democrat, I would have won that. I would have been the city council. But of course, God has a way of doing things in His way and not your way.
Because it's His plan.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm mighty glad that I didn't win that election, didn't win the congressional election I ran for several years later, because my life today, my life today is a lot better than. Anyway, I went through some bumps and bruises. Don't get me wrong. So anyway,
but we are what we're supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, in 1990, the election situation was the same way. I mean, the election organization was the same way. It was still separate primaries, so we had to run in a Republican and Democratic primary. Well, there were several blacks who ran in the Democratic primary. Harold Gibson. Oh man, there were a bunch of people ran that side. But anyway, Harry Reagan, who was at the time editorial director for Channel 4, very popular, been around for a long time, ended up winning that side, and they turned out a lot of the vote. I ran against a guy by the name of Tim Carter, who was a paraplegic, and only beat him by like 2 points. And I'll never forget, what was his name? He was a big-time political operative in the election. We turned out on the what's his name side, the Republican side was very, very low. And I won by only 2 points, and he called me Landslide Little. It was too funny. Anyway, Harry Reagan beat me by 20 points, beat me 60-40.
But at the time, Jacksonville, I mean, we're still heavily Democratic.
Well,
now registered, but at the time, people voted actually Democrat.
Well, because you had the separate primaries, so you could actually identify better than you could with your election.
They vote really Republican. Right. Even though most people in Jacksonville are registered as Democrats.
Right. Yeah. But and also remember you had to run, when I ran, you had to run county-wide. It wasn't like the way they have the at-large seats now. They have them, even though they don't have them, portion like district seats. But they're just bigger districts.
No,
what I'm saying is you have to be you can't.
Right, but you still have to run county-wide.
You have to run county-wide. Yeah. But
you have to be from a certain part of the county to run. Yeah.
This way, because Harry lived on the south side,
right?
So it would have been a different configuration.
But it still wouldn't have been, because it still would have been the same kind. Like when I ran, it was a countywide election.
But I would have won had it been the way Sam Newby is. Yeah, I would have won, because that's basically that seat. Has been really earmarked at large for minority access. Exactly. Because remember when Chandler Thompson and then Glorious Johnson.
But you also had to run countywide, and the R is now, but at the time it wasn't as prevalent.
It wasn't, but the thing too is many people who didn't live in those
special areas,
they didn't vote.
Yeah.
So you basically got the black vote. Even though it was a unitary election, so both Democrats and Republicans could vote. So I guarantee you that many of those people got a lot of Democratic votes.
I got you.
So with me, it was countywide, period. It wasn't living. You can live at the beach and run for that seat.
Right.
You can't do that today. And for those seats.
No, but you still have to run countywide.
You have to get votes countywide.
Which is still people, it's scary to most people. And I mean,
it's scary.
I've done it.
But you can win if you get a good turnout in a certain area, and the other people say, "Well, I don't, that's made for black people. I'm not going to vote for that." And that's what they did. You could tell the numbers. And the numbers were down.
And at the time, the numbers could be high at the top of the ballot, but by the time you get down ballot to those other seats, you see, the numbers drop off.
Right. But I'm not that's all that's in hindsight. Yeah. Bottom line is I ran a different way than when Gwen Chandler ran in 1995 and won when Delaney was elected mayor.
So you're out there talking.
Is
that where they said, hey, this guy needs to be on the radio?
No, I'll tell you what happened. Mike Dorwart was the program director at WOKV.
Yep.
And he interviewed then they were doing a lot of local politics on the radio. Unlike today, they don't do that anymore. They don't do that like that anymore. And so the race that was, since our race was the city council race was the only race because it was a special election. He interviewed me and Harry back and forth quite a bit. After the primary, it was Marc Little versus Harry Reagan, black Republican versus white Democrat. What? How did that? So that was a big deal. So whenever I was on the air, people were calling up and saying, I can't vote for you because you're a Republican. These are white people. But you really have some different ideas about things. Give an example. I talked about the minority, and one thing some people will tell you, the reason they voted against me because I was against the minority set-aside. That wasn't true. I said we need to change the minority set-aside. I said, why would I, as a business person, which I was in business at the time, why do I want to just accept 10% when I can get 90%?
Or get the whole contract.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was my fight. But of course, Reagan was, in his own inimitable way, was changing it, saying Little was against the set-aside. When really, in essence, you could say I was against the set-aside. So that was always the headline would be David. I can't remember David's last name, who was the beat reporter on that. Oh, what was his name? Anyway, he interviewed me at lunch. We had lunch at the old the restaurant at the Land. They used to have the biscuits, real good biscuits. What was the name of that restaurant? Anyway, we were down there thinking about eating, right? So he did an interview, and it was all about the set-aside. So I broke it down to him. Please. He wrote the thing all bass-ackwards. It was just, it wasn't what I said. Well, what can I say?
But you spent the next few years, though, as one of the top radio talk.
What happened after that, Rahman, was that after the election, and Reagan had beaten me, Harry Reagan, of course, had to leave his job at Channel 4. He didn't have a job. So he applied for the job at OKV because they needed it, because Dort was coming off the air. So Mike calls me up and says, would you like to audition for the job? I said, yeah. He said, well, that going to take away from business? I said, I think I can get away and do the job during the day, because it was only an hour. I was 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
But this is 5 days a week.
5 days a week.
Yeah.
We auditioned, and the audience was like an audience favorite audience kind of thing, where the audience weighed in.
Right.
I beat Harry Reagan about 80 to 20. He got the job.
And even after that, you still ended up doing so well. You were number one.
I was what happened was,
and you were the anchored by Rush Limbaugh.
Well, what happened was that because I had been deemed conservative because of some of my views, which I would say they were mainstream, but because they were so different at the time. I mean, what black person is going to oppose a minority set aside? I mean, come on,
Yeah.
And of course, that would, and there would be questions sometimes that they would take it. Well, if you're against the set aside, then you're against affirmative action.
And it just snowballed.
Exactly, it snowballed. So I just said, well, if that's what you want to do, I'll take it. So I became the black conservative, coming behind Rush Limbaugh.
Before, what's the other black conservative?
Ken Hamlin?
Yeah, before Ken Hamlin.
Well, Ken Hamlin ended up getting that time slot when I left.
Okay.
And so that's what happened. And I ran for office, and that's how I got into talk radio. I was gone from radio after I got, started working on my business and everything. And so I wasn't doing any radio for 4 years maybe? Yeah, 4 years. And I got into talk radio. That's how I got into talk radio through a campaign. I ended up, and so as the several years were going by, and Corrine ran in 1992.
Former Congresswoman Corrine Brown.
Right. This is when they flipped all those districts in 1990.
Right.
Which, by the way, people are talking about gerrymandering and tearing up. Let me tell you what they're going to happen. If these Democrats who don't understand, if they turn those districts, some of those districts will be represented by white Democrats. Yes. But they don't get it. See, I know because I've been there. But anyway, so Corrine was running for office in 1992. She ran against this guy by the name of Don Widener. And of course, Don was on some of the talk shows during the day and other radio stations. And so people automatically thought I was going to be supporting Don Widener. And I said, I'm not supporting Don Widener. I'm not supporting anybody. But because I was a Republican, Corrine put it out that I was supporting a Republican, which was a lie.
Which later down the road, you and she made fences and you ended up working together.
Right. But 92 was when, in 91, end of 91, Dick Brown over at Channel 7 got this germ of an idea. He wanted to start a local show called the Polecats.
I was going to say, was that the Polecats was a political pundit show prior to the CNN talking head pundits that are so popular today. The Polecats was the precursor to that.
The Polecats was going to be the local version of the McLaughlin group. I don't know if you remember the McLaughlin group. It was on what's the station? The
PBS.
station.
It was on PBS.
The McLaughlin Group.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we were. And it was fire away going at each other. And Charles Griggs, who was my business partner, who was very good friends with the people at Channel 7, they said to him, do you think your partner would like to be on this show? And so he said, well, I don't know. We got business, we got work and everything, but I'll ask him. So he asked me. And I said, well, let me talk to Dick Brown. Dick Brown told me what the format of the show was going to be. And they paid.
Which is a blessing right there.
Right. They paid an honorarium.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, why not?
And the Polecats you guys were on the air for how long?
Oh, they were on the air for a long time. I stayed on for 5 years.
Right. It was a long time. And they were running, what, once a week?
Once a week, on Friday mornings.
Yeah.
Well, actually, when they did reruns on the weekends. They did them. So it ran about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And that show got me popular. And also, they had an election. Which election were they having? And Mike Dillon, who was working Channel 12, Michael Dillon started a show called The Insiders, and I was on that.
Yeah.
So I had radio 5 days a week, and every weekend I was on 2 TV shows. So my popularity rose for 3 straight years. The best of Folio Weekly. I know we've gone a long time.
But this gives a good insight.
Folio Weekly had this thing called the Best of. And I was voted the best talk show host for 3 years in a row on radio talk show host in the city for 3 years in a row.
So we get through all of this, and then you reinvent yourself again and open a public relations consulting firm.
Well, yeah, because my affiliation with my advertising PR firm that I had called Urban Media Communications, but partnership was going there. I had already had that. That opened, like I said, in 1984. And then I renamed it in 1986 when I took on the pageant campaign. So that had already been happening.
Right.
Yeah. But what I did was I broke up that and went on my own with what I call Marc Little Public Relations.
Which lasted for 10 years?
From 1997 to 2000, 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
And public relations strategies, consulting, all that stuff.
Right.
So how did we get from that? And you are well known in your own right. As we've seen, you've done radio, you've done TV, you've done all this stuff. But in your own right, you're well known. However, your sister is a New York Times bestselling author.
She wrote a book called Good Hair, 1996.
Yeah. And
Simon & Schuster.
Yeah.
Right.
And you, although super intelligent, had done more PR and writing, you had not done fiction writing, except for the fact that you were a political consultant. That could be considered fiction writing.
You're right about that.
But you ended up, the writing book, I mean, you're actually really good. You got 5 novels to your credit. 7 now? 7? 6. No, but the new one's coming out.
7, that'd be 7. I rewrote the last one.
Okay.
I did that over. You could, and it's under a different ISBN. So it's actually
but there's
a first and second edition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's really 6 books.
So this is your 6th book will be released.
This is my 6th title.
Your 6th title will come out later this
year.
My
7th title will come out.
7th title. I'm sorry. Your 7th title will come out.
I have 5 books, but 6 titles.
Gotcha.
How about that?
And your 7th book,
my 7th title will come out later on this year.
Later in 2020.
Yeah.
So how'd you get from real fiction, I guess, which is political, fixing, to like fiction?
After I sold my business in 2004, I went through a period where I was consulting for the people who bought my business, a company out of Coral Gables, and they were paying me. And then I was doing some acting. Thanks to you, I was doing a little acting in commercials and things like that. And so
enjoying the good life.
Yeah, but that's when my marriage was falling apart at the same time. And so I began to start seeing myself. When you get a chance to be alone, you start and age, you start seeing yourself in a different light. You start seeing yourself in a different light. You become, it said, that's me? Oh, really? I didn't know that. And I started doing things, and I would write little stories about myself, and I was really getting into my faith, and I was writing things about my faith, and so I'm sitting at the in my
faith
house.
is important to you, and
yeah, this got very important, but it became real important
at that time.
Right.
And in fact, there are people, as we were talking earlier at lunch, where folk were saying, "Yeah, Mark's in the monastery now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting in my home, and I was speaking. It was on Martin Luther King's birthday. Well, it was on the 15th. It wasn't the observance. It was on the 15th. And I was sitting there and I was saying, Lord, if there's any story I can tell that will extol the virtues of your grace, your mercy and grace and mercy for me, and how much you've done for me in my darkest times, what can I do? And I know people, when I say this, they laugh at me, but I heard God say, well, I want you to put it down where people can so it'll be preserved for history. And I want to make sure that you say, when I call, don't blink. And that was
first book, Don't Blink When God Calls. Yeah.
And so I started writing. I only really meant to write one book, but something very, very strange happened. My mother sent me some money, because this was really when self-publishing was really getting going. And of course, you had these different companies, and there was this company that was offering that they would put your book together, for $400. My mother sent me $500, and she said, don't you spend this money on anything but the book. And there was a reason for that, because I was going through some changes that was going to
She's like, I want to be a part of this.
And she wants to make sure that I don't use this for anything else. And she meant my soon to be
responsibilities and all that stuff. Yeah,
my changing relationship with my former wife. So I wrote the book. I worked hard. If you read the book, if anybody gets a book, it was a rough written book, but I didn't have an editor, I did have an editor, but he even told me, Jerry, my good friend Jerry. What's Jerry's last name? Anyway, Jerry, we would meet over at the Panera Bread over in San Marco, and we'd sit there and talk about it, and he'd look at it, and he'd do but he was basically a proofreader. He really wasn't an editor. But I learned. And so I began, and then at the same time I was finishing Don't Blink When God Calls, I wrote Angels of the Midst, which was a sequel to Don't Blink When God Calls. And so I started getting the bug. And just as Don't Blink was getting going, my mother passed away. And there were stories germinating within me about things that I started thinking about, talking about, and just all kinds. You go down this way.
That you had to tell.
Right. And so the third book was Magnificent Redemption, which really got me turning around and understanding the business. And I learned a lot about the business. And so that's what started my career.
Which has done very well. I mean, you've gotten several awards.
You can go down this way, you can go down this way, whichever way you want to go.
Gotcha. I know this one.
Okay.
Which has gotten several awards.
I won.
Because I'm going to have them all listed on the
Magnificent Redemption. I won the not honorable mention, first runner-up in the African American category for the Next Generation Indie Book Awards.
It's almost like having kids. Which one's your favorite? You can't really have a favorite kid, but
probably Faithful Servants.
Okay.
Faithful Servants probably is my favorite one. After Obama was the third book in what I call the Kurt Felton series. It wasn't a sequel, but it was part of that series of Don't Blink and Angels. So After Obama was part of that. Magnificent Redemption was one on its own, and then Faithful Servants, my book that's currently out, was a standalone book.
And what do you see next? I mean, obviously you're living a great life, your kids are grown, you're enjoying a great marriage, things are really well, but you're still writing, which is great.
I love
you're still creating. Will you see any of your pieces make it to film?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because a good friend of mine, teammate of mine from high school, who's been living in LA, he's a trainer, but he's also been involved in in TV and film, a guy by the name of Wayne Slappy. Wayne, we were both inducted into our high school's Hall of Fame recently. We were together over the holidays this past year. And he got the book, and he called me one morning, like he lives out in LA, so he calls me at, I guess 11 o'clock, it was 2 o'clock my time, so I was already in bed when I woke up the next morning. And he didn't identify himself. He said, I love this book. He said, I couldn't put it down. And he said, we need to do something. We need to do a movie. He started talking about movie and everything. So I called him back, and we must have stayed on the phone for at least 3 hours.
Talking that LA stuff.
We're talking about high school.
But also there's possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, Wayne, what about this? I said, because I've attempted to start a screenplay. What if we looked at doing an 8 to 10 series
Yeah.
on cable? Because,
and this is before the popularity of Netflix series.
Yeah. Netflix was just, Netflix is really just, Netflix is really, because people don't realize Netflix really didn't kick it to what, last summer?
It's been about
Netflix
two, 3 years.
Netflix kicked with House of Cards, right?
Yeah, that was one of the major pops. When people really took notice.
Right.
And then they just started slamming out production.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what he was talking about. You go down this way, go this way. So he's talking about content. Yeah. He said that everybody wants content. I said, yeah. And then, of course, Barack and Michelle's thing has come through. And so there's a lot of stuff out there.
And then people are like, and all of the networks are getting stuff. Hulu has got stuff.
Right.
I got a friend of mine who's a Broadway playwright. She's got one of her plays turned into a series on Stars. Mm-hmm. So you got more. And back in the day, as you remember, it was only HBO.
That's right.
And
Showtime.
Yeah, but HBO was Showtime somewhat like.
But HBO was the king.
It was the king. Remember, they had Oz.
Oh, yeah.
The big one. And nobody else dared do a series HBO.
Right. Showtime was just one run.
Yes.
Right. You're exactly right.
Yes.
So I said to him, I said, the way Faithful Servants is written, I can break this book down and we can do flashbacks. So he said, that like The Sopranos. I said, yes. So I'm working on a screenplay right now.
Awesome.
In fact, he gave me, because as you know, to format a screenplay, unless you really, really know what you're doing, is difficult.
It is.
He got me I got software for it.
Yep.
The software is so easy.
All you got to do
that's it.
Yeah.
And it lays.
If you don't mind my asking, what software?
Costs $199. Not front page. What's the name of that software? I'll tell you what. When I get home,
the PC, the Mac is on the Mac.
No, it's PC version.
You paid for it?
$199. Wow, you got it.
The software that I'm going to tell you about is free.
Well, free ain't always good.
No, it's web-based. I teach with it. It's called Celtics.
I keep forgetting about you, teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, send that to me. I'll send you. I'll send you the one that he.
I think it might. It's not front page. It's called.
That's not front page, but this is not front page. It's something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, now we're talking shop. Are we still interviewing?
Yes, yeah. Because I'm gonna chop it up. I mean, come on, how to chop it up.
Yeah, right.
In fact, I think I'm gonna do like over 2 shows.
Because man, I can.
That's why I driving.
I can tell. No, I see he burn all his gas. He gonna charge me for all this shit.
No, this like 2 shows. This good.
But the screenplay, you asked me about that.
Yeah.
Because right now, and one thing I can say, Rahman, about me, about my life, from the time I can remember to now, I've always had a great sense of timing.
Yes.
I could find something, I won't say that. Not a great sense. I have a sense of timing. It's not always great because sometimes I'm ahead of myself. And so when I bring it to somebody, I don't know about that. And then 5 years later,
it's the thing.
This is like with Black Republicans.
Yes.
Who thought about a Black Republican?
Yeah.
Black Republican.
And then
all of a sudden, all these dudes be running around here.
I'm Senator Tim
Scott.
Yeah.
I'm Black Republican. Huh?
It's a thing.
But I'm proud of that because as I said, I'm approaching 70, but my mind is almost like a 30-year-old.
Well, you open the door. I mean, you still have the
and I don't close the door to ideas.
Yeah.
You're 43 years old.
Yeah.
What's that? 27 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you bring stuff to me, what do I say?
Let's look at this. Yeah, like now, the software. I just said, hey, this software.
And so I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm saying to myself, so when I sit in my study, I'm talking to say, man, Mark, you got an open mind. Because that's what my mother was. When I would bring stuff to her, other than going down south, she would always say, try it.
Or what she'd be like what we call an early adopter.
Yes.
So she'd be the one, if there was internet, she would be going to Google.
Yes.
Yeah.
She talked to me about it. When I wanted to open an advertising agency, when I talked about what? Hey, I get the call from one who's doing national business right down in Miami.
Yeah.
Bernadette Morris.
Yeah.
I meet with her. She's still working in Miami-Dade. I'm going to start an advertising agency. And guess what I'm doing it because of you. And now look what she's probably multi-millionaire.
No, she's one of the top PR firms in the country, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
you look at Burrell's. I mean, a lot of that.
Right. But see, all those guys are passe.
Yeah.
You don't hear much about them because what's happening.
People are more boutique.
More boutique.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And many of the kids that are coming out of the colleges are going into divisions in major companies because the major companies said, oh,
we could do that in-house.
Yeah. And so who's going to go? And I'm not saying that working for a black company is bad, but when you think about security, contacts, diversity, just all kinds of things.
Retirement packages.
See, all this stuff.
Yeah,
and see, that's why when people talk about HBCUs versus traditional colleges and playing sports, sure, I would love to see black guys and black young ladies play for Florida A&M, Bethune-Cookman, Jackson State, Grambling, but they can't get on TV every other night in basketball. Every week.
Now, I will say
whereas the big colleges have 10 places to go, they have maybe one or two.
And
ESPNU.
But I see now, like when you have a school like A&T and other schools like that are moving into the major sphere, which sports has been your thing too. Like that's a major, but I see these bigger HBCUs really being like, I think the first ones to do it were Grambling and Southern when they took the Bayou Classic to NBC. Right, but once again, they're still considered black. Yeah.
And what happens is they fight.
It's not football. It's black.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you try to tell them, okay, guys, we know it's black football. But it's football.
Right.
It's basketball. It's track and field. Why do we have to keep saying that? It's obvious who we are. When we talk, because you have too many outlets now.
Yeah.
But so you don't have to do it. Oh, but we got to stay true to I said, you're staying true to your cause because you're moving forward. Those people who paved the way would not be angry at you if you call yourself traditional or whatever, because we know you're black.
Let me ask you this.
And we got to fight that stigma. We got to stop that, because if we don't, and we're already finding it, we're going to keep getting slotted in places where we know we can be better. We've got scholar athletes, and we've got scholar athletes that are coming out of traditional HBCUs. And I'm not talking about scholar athletes taking recreational science. I'm talking about taking
going doctors and smart guys.
So
smart
why are we limiting ourselves like that?
Let me ask you this as we begin to wind this down, because we've had some great conversation.
Yeah.
What is it? And this is something I don't want you to give a prediction, because I don't want to be the one to kind of put it in any negative light, because you know how much I love the news.
Right.
Having been a news anchor and a writer and a journalist and all that stuff. Can news directed toward people of color work? Because BET did it.
But
I did it for TV One. I'm sorry. BET did it. Kind of didn't work. TV One did it. Didn't work. I did it for Bounce.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work.
Right. Well, because people are watching everything. And when you say black news, and this is the way that I understand what the premise is, but if somebody, this is hard to really, any news of black news is news. And
I agree. News is news.
So how do you attract an audience because you're competing for those eyes? How are you going to say, okay, I got black news over here, so you take your eyes away from NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN,
Fox.
MSNBC, Fox, and all that to watch my news?
What differentiates your news from news?
Really? I mean, that's the thing we got to think about. And I don't know.
Because entertainment may be different, but news is the same.
No, news is the same. Yeah. Entertainment, because in entertainment you have so many.
There's country, there's blues.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got black people in all of those genres.
Yeah, but they're still a part of that. Thing.
Yeah, but
although there's still some fight for acceptance, because I was reading this year and I don't know the specifics of that because I do like country music, but they were saying Lil Nas X.
Right.
They did not. I think they weren't able to consider him or didn't want to consider him
for Country Music Awards.
For the Country Music Awards.
I didn't read about that. I'm gonna pull that up.
Yeah. So you're still dealing with, even though you're in those categories, because you can't really call him R&B, but you can't call him country, but you can't. I mean, where does he fit?
Where does he fit?
Yeah.
And he's done the requisite things to be able to bring, because he got Billy Ray Cyrus.
And he's done a remix. He's done 1 million trillion remixes. It is the most recognized or most, I think, what was it, the number one song for longest in the history of music?
I don't know.
He had like a platinum sell. Oh yeah, he's got.
But he's huge. Let's just put it.
He's humongous.
Right. So at that point, and I'm not saying that. And I think people, when you talk like I'm talking, people get upset because they're thinking you're running away from the tribe. That's not the point. But there's so many things out there till you if you limit yourself, you're taking the people who are talented and asking them to limit themselves. And they don't want to do that. And what I say is that if you open your eyes and become more, that you broaden your horizons.
Yes. You
will be able to find the photograph. The photograph, great movie. It was 2 black people, but I could see
the story.
They could be a white person.
Could have been Chinese.
Right. Just listening. So the Chinese Al Green, the girls dancing the Chinese Al Green. Kung Fu. Oh, how do you break a Kung Fu heart?
Whatever it is, it's still the beauty of the story.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And so, but it's hard, especially for people of my generation, to get that, because they get so, oh, Mark, they're never going to do. And you keep saying what they ain't going to do. Stop saying what they ain't going to do and say what I can do.
And do it.
And do it.
Great way to end the show. Your music teacher, your former music teacher. Remember years ago, I did a show with Melba Moore.
Right.
And Melba was your choir teacher.
She was our music teacher.
Music teacher.
Let me tell you what she told us. I'm going to tell you what she did for us. No, in grammar school. 5th grade.
And she was your teacher?
Yes.
Back then?
Yes. My mother's best friend.
What did she tell you?
When we were singing, we had a lady named Mrs. Goldstein, who was our music teacher. Nice lady. But she never told us about saying, instead of saying manufacturer. And she would tell us how to end a song. 5th grade now. We ain't talking about high school. 5th grade, how you end the song. She was teaching us that, how to talk, how to speak.
Enunciate.
Exactly.
Yes.
5th grade, 1961.
Yeah.
That, what she was saying, the greater audience will accept anything, no matter what you look like, but you have to be able to show that you know what you're doing. Leontine Price did it. Marian Anderson did it.
Even Mahalia, she was still a very precise artist.
All these great people did it, but what we do is that those who are coming behind are thinking that there's some kind of code that these people worked with that said we got to sound a certain way to get to our people. Our people accepted them, and the other people, in a way, accepted them.
No, in a way, they accepted them fully.
And so,
when Melba told me, Miss Melba, she said, I think I told you I did a show with her last year at the Ritz. She came to do the anniversary at the Ritz. She was here.
I didn't know that.
And but she had told me.
So I've lost contact with her.
20 years ago, when she was doing something for Edward Waters College, my undergrad alma mater, and she was there, and she said to me, because I was a little frustrated. I was an actor, and I was.
Wait a minute, I was there.
You were there,
yeah.
We were doing
I was working with Vaughn
and Jimmy Jenkins.
Yeah,
and Dr. Jenkins was there.
Yeah.
And so we were just having a artist to artist conversation. I was like, man, it's not. I'm an actor, and I'm a real actor, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and my agent keeps sending me for these roles that are black roles. And she waited, and then she says, so why are you accepting them? If you want to do something more, then create it. And that conversation gave me the impetus to start trusting myself enough to believe that I no longer had to only audition for black roles. That's right. That I could audition for roles, and not only audition, if I was not getting the roles that I wanted, that I saw myself playing, then start creating your own projects. And it was some of the best advice that I could get. Like what you just said, don't wait on someone, create your own path.
Give you exact point. There's a group, my man Troy Johnson, African American Literary Black AALBC, and it's a conglomeration of black artists, black authors, and publishers or whatever. And they have this little group, and it's a cabal. And I've never been invited to their little group because I don't write like Elin Harris or what's the other Eric Jerome Dickey. I don't. That's not my kind of way to write. So therefore, I didn't get mad. I didn't get angry with them. I still communicate with them whenever I get a chance to go to the Black Pack party up in Harlem during the Black Expo America. I'll go, and they'll have a little thing over in Harlem. I'll hang out. Nobody knows me. They got their own little crowd. They're taking their pictures and everything. And I'm not mad at them. In fact, I'm going to Houston. I'm going right in their face in Houston for the convention there. But I could have said, okay, I'm going to write like them. Whatever they do, whatever their little Eric Jerome Dickey has this thing with the foil being the man and the hero, the man being the hero and the foil being the other woman and all that, that kind of stuff. I don't write that. And I'm not angry, but that's not the way I write. Right now, I'm going, and I think I'm going to stay in this. I'm going this great migration route. This next book, The Bootleger's Mistress, it is the bomb. When you read this book, I might just send you a manuscript tonight, let you read the manuscript, because I'm gonna send it to you. This book it's unedited, so
yeah.
Rahman, when you make your decision to step out in faith and really capture what you know is right, but you got to work for it. You got to market it. You got to go to the places that's going to and look at it critically. Some people say, oh, it's great. People say it's a piece of crap. You have to be able to get over the people who you would believe, hint, my sister, who you would believe that would sit down and talk with you, who don't even pay you any attention. You got to get over that. I guarantee you will be a success. I've done it when I was in radio, when I hired a white guy to do morning radio, and I was criticized. The Urban League, Ronnie Ferguson, and the NAACP, Willie Dennis, came to the radio station and told my boss that we should let him go because Hey Now was derogatory to the black community. That's a true story. But I did not back down.
But he was one of the most beloved people in our community.
And there's not one negative thing somebody can say about him. He never chased any kids. He didn't go to high schools chasing little girls. He didn't do none of that.
Nicest guy you ever want to meet.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm learning this, but it takes, man, let me tell you something. It takes hard work. It takes taking a lot of shit. I'm sorry. But it takes a lot of stuff. But once you get to that, when you start going to, and you start seeing the thing, you say, wow. And every night I go to bed. I used to go to bed early, 10:30, latest 11. Now I go to bed at 12:30, 1 o'clock, because I'm sitting in my study. I'm not doing it. I'm just thinking, I can't believe I'm in this place. Because I was in a dark place, man, back from 2000 to around 2012, 12 years.
Accident and just the progression.
Yeah. It was dark, man. It was dark. And I say to them, and then like I say to you, because you're going through your darkness. But there's a light. Trust me, there's a light. But it's that little sliver of light that comes underneath the door.
Yeah, okay.
You know, everything else is dark. And if you could reach for that little bitty light and just pull on it, just a little bit, all of a sudden it becomes lighter and lighter before you got a room full of light. But it takes a while. You gotta have that patience. And if there's anything I can say about my career, is that I've been through all of those. Nothing like the darkest period, but there've been some dark periods. But I kept at it, kept my faith, and it's starting to work. And I'm telling you, this next book, I'm telling you,
this is a great way to end the show. Marc Little, the author of Faithful Servants, and we are looking forward to the Bootlegger's Mistress. We'll have all the details on rockmanjohnson.com. Go by and check it out. Also, we'll link to your social media sites again. Thank you. Marc Little, the legend.
I told you about that.
Well, there you have it. That's the end of the show. I told you it'd be a long show. And you know what? I'm not going to talk long. Just want to remind you that inside is the opportunity to do whatever you want. So like Marc Little, use it. I'll see you next time on the Rahman Experience.
Yo, M-I-G-S-G-R-A-N-T.
It's your boy Lynch. You already know what time it is, man. You hear them birds calling. Listen. It's the Rahman Experience.
The Rahman Experience.
The knowledge that he dropping, most dismissive, make you curious.
And we can't mess this up, cause you know he gon' be furious.
He bring the news to you, cause it's the truth, ain't no stopping it. Say you didn't know, well here's the proof coming from
Rahman Johnson, ain't no straight out of Compton. Duval County with that way that we rockin'. Now you tuned in
to the Rahman Experience.